I'm Jan with Jan Patek Quilts, and I do needle turn applique. And today we're going to play with the pumpkin mini quilt. I love pumpkins. I always have. Of course, that's because I love that time of year. Plus, they're pretty colors. I like orange. Okay. The applique on it, it really isn't much different than you do on any other kind of freezer paper applique. What I'm going to focus on this is the fact that you need, and I've said this before, if you're going to hand quilt them like we do on the little mini quilts, then you need to take the back out. And particularly on this part here, where you're going to mark your quilting line, it helps if you take not just the pumpkin out, but the center of the pumpkin. And this is where these little stupendous, I use the Dovo ones. You can get ones that are not quite as expensive. It's just I use them all the time, so I do that. But any sharp pointed small scissors. Now, the trick is not cutting through both layers. And if you do, I want to tell you, because I have done it before on quite a few occasions, just make a little patch and sew it over it. It's primitive quilting. We don't care if there's in fact, I don't think anybody's ever noticed on one of my quilts that there's a little patch there. Okay, pull the two layers apart after you've got it done and make a snit while this is sticking up here. Now you don't have to worry in your initial cut about going through, and then you can just keep it pulled up as you trim. And just be careful, so I'm not going to go fast so we get through here too quickly. And you needed, the reason this was already done here was before I sewed this on, the green one on, which I'm going to cut the back out of too, but before I sewed it on, I wanted to make sure the back was gone here, because otherwise I would have been sewing it onto the actual background fabric, and then you can't cut it out unless you want to cut your, okay, so there's a lot of little things I've learned over the, as my grandchildren say, I've been quilting since the dinosaurs roamed. Probably not quite that long, but close. That I've figured out that make it easier. Okay, so now we've cut this piece out. Now that we've cut that piece out, I would go ahead and cut this piece out too, but I'm not going to show you how to do that. I just showed you. Now when you lay this down on your sandpaper board, it's a lot easier. Now if you need to, you can put the pattern under here and hold it up to a window or use a light box, but I always just eyeball. If you need to do that, the quilting lines will be on your pattern. So you just lay your pattern down on top of a light box or on a window and then draw your quilting lines on so you know where to go. With this on the black on the insides, you don't really need to draw your quilting line around here because I have already done that. I drew my lines for my embroidery floss by putting it on a light box. Well, I just eyeballed it, but put it on a light box if you need to, or your window. Okay, if you're not going to do that, it's a lot easier because you can use your sandpaper board and just sketch. And you know, it doesn't matter if it's exactly the same place it is on the pattern. You can see what it's supposed to look like. And then the sandpaper board will hold it in place and make it much easier too. And at about this point, I also usually take my ruler and a pencil and mark my quilting lines. And my quilting lines on this are 2 inches apart because that's the size of my ruler. So you just lay your ruler down on an angle and then draw with your pencil, and it's a lot easier on your sandpaper board. Now you've got that ready, you can go ahead and sew the strip that's going to look like it's your binding that holds the two together, and then sew your log cabin block to the other side and put it in your quilting hoop, you know, layered with your backing, your batting, and then your top, so you can quilt it. But you've got all your quilting lines marked in advance. Okay, to recap, if you're going to cut the backing out, which makes it much easier to get fine stitches, which I don't get too carried away with how fine they have to be, but I want them to be nice and even. And if you have too many layers, they aren't going to be nice and even. It's going to be too hard. So you cut the back out by pulling your two apart and making a little cut here. So that's your first one, and you don't have to dig in, and then just going over and cutting out your back. And then you can lay it on your sandpaper board and eyeball mark, or use a light table if you need to, and your pattern, and mark your quilting lines on the black. And you don't need to do this, but your embroidery lines on that piece. So we hope you've enjoyed this tutorial from Jan Patek Quilts. If you have, please subscribe to our channel. Thanks, and have a great day.